We are indeed. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our second session of our Citizens Academy for 2020. Thank you so much for being here. Today's session is going to kick off with administration. And at this time, I'd like to introduce our city manager, Ken Domer.
Hello and welcome to the Citizens Academy. I think this is a great opportunity for people to learn a little bit more about what the city does and how we run things. And as you go through all the different departments, by the end of it, I know you will have a greater understanding and appreciation of all the things that the city does and how we operate. And hopefully we answer all your questions. So with that, I'm going to kick off administration. Administration basically is the city manager's office, the city council office, and the city clerk's office. And just to give you a couple facts about Fullerton at a glance. Yes, there we go. So there are 34 cities in Orange County. Fullerton is the 6th largest of those cities. We are the 41st largest in California. And it's kind of funny because on both the 6th largest and the 41st in the city or in the state, we go back and forth with the city of Orange. We are very similar in size, population, and even geographic with the city of Orange. So sometimes we flip-flop, but we're there about right now. So we have about 143,000 people in our city. We host 4 colleges and universities. That's why we are the education community. And again, about 22.4 square miles. So we're a good chunk of real estate. We have, some flatlands. We have the hills, kind of go over the hills a little bit. And then we're surrounded by the freeways, 57 and 91. So next slide. So a little bit more of at a glance. On Tuesday, the city council approved our budget for the fiscal year 2021, so 2020-21. A fiscal year in a city starts July 1 and it ends June 30th. So we have, less than 30 days right now in the current fiscal year. It's been quite a fiscal year, given the public health crisis. But overall, we have $240 million of a total budget. So you're going to hear some different figures. General fund is basically that funding source, and there's about $100 million, $104 million in our general fund expenditure budget. That's generally what we can do and allocate in what pays for the city manager's office, city council, public works, parks and rec, police and fire. And police and fire take up about 70% of that general fund budget. The remaining is, since we do have our own water utility, so water fees pays for all the infrastructure and is supported by the users getting and paying for the water. That replaces the water mains. You'll learn a lot more about that during the public works session. City has about 568 total employees. Of that, 516 are full-time, 52 are part-time. Due to the financial conditions that were brought on by COVID, there was, a news story back, it's been now maybe a month and a half. We did have to separate or lay off about 153 part-time employees, mostly from our Parks and Recreation Department, a few more from our library, and then a couple sprinkling in the Public Works and elsewhere. So still a lot of part-time employees out there, mostly right now in the police department, because that includes our cadets and some of our senior volunteers. So, but that's when you look at the side, police department has about 206 employees, public works, maintenance, about 113, fire, I think that says 83, public works engineering, so the engineering side of it used to be its own department about 8 years ago, 27 employees. And then you see the rest. So admin services, which has 37, that's one of the green pieces of pie on that graph, is currently it's HR and finance, so all your accounting functions. And again, there'll be a separate function on them too. So Anissa, next slide. So real quickly, what does a city manager do? So the city manager is responsible for the day-to-day administration of city operations, and I carry out the city council policy direction. So I do hire all the department heads, the executive team, other than the police chief. I do have the responsibility for the discipline and potential separation or termination of a police chief, but the city council retains that ability to hire the police chief. But whoever that police chief is part of the executive team that reports to me. So I'm also responsible to present a balanced budget to the city council. So let's see, I'm approaching my third year here. The first year I started in July, so that was not my budget, but we did present another balanced budget. It was very difficult given the public health crisis and the hit to our finances and just ongoing fiscal issues. But that is what the city council debated and considered for a final time on Tuesday and did adopt. So basically, under the Fullerton Municipal Code is all the duties related to the city manager, and that's under Chapter 2.09. So in just talking about city council meetings, I have to be present at all of them, though I can miss one here or there, but it's best not to. Mostly, if I do know I have to miss one for a vacation or something, what I do is make sure that I'm part of the entire lead up to that meeting so that the agendas and all that stuff are getting through, getting them from the departments and getting approved to be considered by the city council. So, but basically that agenda management is how we get the direction from the city council. A lot of people think that the city council can, just, give me a call and say, hey, what about this? The only time I can take policy direction is from the city council in a city meeting and by majority. So that's 3 of the 5 members. So that's kind of an important thing. We'll discuss that a little bit more. So next slide. All right, so just a little bit more. A city manager, people ask me a lot of times if I'm elected. It's like, no, I'm appointed, and I am appointed by the city council. So, and what the city manager is when you think of a private corporation, I'm the CEO and the city council are the board of directors. So that's probably the easiest way to kind of understand what a city manager does. It's that day-to-day activity of the city, unlike a manufacturing plant or a retail store where there's generally products or single issues. One of the issues I have to do here is there's responsibility from sewers, fire, police, children's programs, seniors programs, the water utility, HR, understanding all the myriad of labor laws, though I am really much a generalist. That's why I have department heads, and that's why it's my personal belief to hire the most experienced and best department heads that I can, because I need them to run the departments. I'm not going to be the one that does it for them, though I need to know enough in order to help them and to ask the right questions. So, but I really think that the most important role of a city manager is that fiduciary responsibility, that financial responsibility of efficient use of tax dollars and providing the services to the community. Because we're not selling a product, we're taking your tax dollars and we're using them to provide police, fire, public works, streets to the best of our ability, which we've been lacking. And so there's a need for a huge commitment to doing that in the most efficient and effective way. And that's been my mantra, and that's what I want to do. I'll talk a little bit shortly about where I came from as a city manager, why I wanted to be a city manager. But so being a city manager means you're working for, I have 5 bosses. City council has all of you as bosses. There they are. We're going to go back one slide though. Back to other. Yeah, that way. Thank you. And so, but I do oversee all the 7 department heads and other executives. Like the deputy city manager is on the executive team, the deputy director of community and economic development, and the deputy director of public works, who's our city engineer. So, and then also very importantly is that external relations with community groups, cities, county, state. There's a lot of coordination and a lot right now, specifically given the COVID public health crisis, where a lot of phone calls, a lot of meetings now online with my colleagues from the other cities, with the county CEO, with other state groups that, we have to keep up, understand what's going on so that we can best operate the city. So advancing to the city council slide. So there are your 5 city council members. And I know Lucinda, who is our city clerk, will talk to you about how they are elected. We do have an election coming up in November in which we will complete the transition, let's say, to all district based. Right now, we still have 3 at-large persons. But what does a city council do? There we go. So basically, much like a board of directors, the city council is setting the policy direction. And again, they have to do so in an open meeting by a majority vote. Again, it's not the mayor. The mayor can't give me a call and say, "Can do this." The mayor can put something on the agenda, or 2 members of council can put something on the agenda. And then at the next city council meeting, the city council will consider that item. And if it passes by 3 votes, then that becomes direction to me to fulfill. So that is how they do the policy direction through that. In putting together those agendas, it's my responsibility to get as much information as possible so that the city council can make an informed decision, that they have the facts, that it's not biased, it's not slighted one way or the other. And so that's very important. So the city council appoints a professional city manager to carry out the day-to-day operations like we talked about earlier. And that process, so I was the assistant city administrator, assistant city manager in Huntington Beach. Prior to that, I was the assistant city manager in the city of Placentia next door. And prior to that, I was the city manager for the city of Villa Park. Prior to all that, I worked in various roles at the County of Orange for probably 8 or 9 years. And before that, I actually worked for the state of California. I was on the Governor Pete Wilson's personal staff, and then in the LA office as a deputy director. Did that during the Malibu and Laguna Beach fires and also during the Northridge earthquake. And that was quite a time and quite a different disaster to work a emergency operations center and kind of the emergency operations after the fact than what we're going through now. But so that was my history, and a lot of my hands-on role really comes from the city of Villa Park, which only had 5 employees. And so as the city manager, I was the finance director, I was the planning director. Here we have a planning department and a planning commission. There, the city council acted as the planning commission too. So I was the one who was doing all the conditional use permits, variances, looking at all the housing, and doing that for the council to make a decision. So it was fun. And even during that time, since we only had 2 members in our public works department, for safety factors, I'd have to go out with them sometimes to help them clean out the catch basins. So you had to have 2 people down in the catch basin and 1 up just as a safety mechanism. So I got my feet dirty during that time. So that was fun. But I also learned a lot about what is my core philosophy, which is that fiscal conservatism and making sure that we are being highly efficient and effective on how we deliver services to everybody. Because when you're only operating off a $2 million budget for a city of 6,000, you really have to be efficient and effective in the use of it. And so in my career path up, I have continued that philosophy all the way here. Just a real quick fact, I was born at St. Jude. I lived the first 9 years of my life on the other side of the 91 freeway in Anaheim, and then moved to Orange, where I still live. In high school, when asked about what my plans were when I was going to grad night celebration, And where I was going, I said I was going to USC, and where I saw myself in 10 years was as the city manager of a small or medium-sized city. So clearly from high school, I knew what a city manager did, and wanted to be one. And I'm very fortunate, I think, to have, gone on a career path and then become a city manager. And in particular, in my career, where I went from a city the size of 6,000, 50,000, the 200,000, and now to Fullerton with 142,000. And this is where I want to end everything. I think it's a great place. The opportunities abound here. The schools, the people, everything is great. So going back to the city council, the city council does appoint me. They go through a process, and it was a competitive recruitment. I went through a community panel, and it was actually quite fun to meet some folks through there, but it was nice to have been selected. So that leads to the council manager form of government. And what that basically means is more than 100 years ago, most cities had a strong mayor component. So you had a mayor who selected all the different staff and basically ran the government. What they discovered was you needed somebody who was actually professionally qualified to be that manager, to understand the operations of a city and all the things that go into it, not just from a political standpoint. So that's where the city manager evolved from. And then the council manager form of government is now the most popular and most prominent form of government, where you have the city council as that the policy board, and then the professional city manager as the day-to-day operations. And the other thing about being appointed or recruiting for a city manager, you have to have experience. And this is no slight on an elected official. What we elect elected officials for is to represent the people and to set the policy that is in line with what the residents want. And so your qualifications to be on council is that you're over 18, you're registered to vote, and you live in the city or the district in which you're going to be elected in. For a city manager, I have a master's degree in public administration. I have 27 years of government experience. I have a couple other certificates and different things. And so it's that basis of the qualifications that, hopefully a city council is looking for in a city manager. So it also, why a city manager form of government, it separates the political pressures of the administration and the local government. So currently in Orange County, there are no full-time mayors. You have full-time mayors in San Diego, Los Angeles, Long Beach, I believe, has one, even though they have a strong city manager setup. And so those, like we all know about Mayor Garcetti in LA. You don't have a city manager for the city of LA. You do have a chief executive officer who does more of the administrative, the budget issues. But the mayor there is the one who pretty much sets the direction, appoints a lot of folks. Going back, a lot of reason why they got rid of a strong mayor in smaller governments is because of the political patronage. So it switched it from that political patronage where you were appointing friends or appointing people who weren't qualified to more of a merit-based employment. And that does help a public service environment and a local government. So it's that professional service delivery that, again, we have a lot of qualifications. When we advertise for an administrative analyst too, which Anissa, as you met at the first one, she has an MPA, and when we looked at the 75 plus applications, more than 3/4 of them had masters in public administrations or an equivalent. So you have a lot of highly educated people who are getting into local government, and it's a very good thing. So, and then just one last thing, it's talked about it earlier. It's patterned after the, a private corporation CEO and all that. So with regard to the overall organization chart, the electors, the people, are in control. They elect the city council. The city council appoints the city manager. City council also appoints the city attorney. And then underneath me are the various departments, with the exception airport and city clerk. Our airport is under the public works. They used to be a department a long time ago. And then city clerk is used to be appointed and actually used to be elected here a long time ago in Fullerton, but now it's within the administration department. So coming into 2020, 2020 was going to be the year. And boy, has it been. But it was going to be the year for a lot of different things. So we had planned to return what I term a lot of punts from the past. So when a decision hasn't been made, you kick the can or you kind of punt it down the road, and we'll get down to it. And for various reasons, going back and forth, there's been a lot of those things. And then the council was going through and doing the interview process with me. That was the one thing that was kind of brought up, is that they wanted to make sure that we were able to deliver on the promises we had for the residents, that, decisions from the past and other things would be brought forward and a final decision would be made. So that's why some folks may see, well, we talked about that years ago, and it may have been true, but nothing was ever definitively concluded on it. So some of those things include the short-term rentals that will be on the next meeting, cannabis, that's going to be on July 7th. Parking issues in downtown is something that we've tackled over the last year. A downtown business improvement district, that is something that's been brought up multiple times, hasn't been implemented, but that's one of the goals to implement here in 2020. Also, my belief is that you can't take an organization and just leave it in place and let it run as it has been before. So every city I go into, I'm always launching department reorganizations and organizational reviews more so. So is that department in line with the best practices of other cities? Are they doing things that, going back to the mantra of being efficient and effective? So here in Fullerton, in the last 2 years now, we've done organizational reviews of public works, community development, the city clerk's office. Currently, we are having a review of Parks and Recreation Department, which includes the museum, and also the Administrative Services Department, which now is, finance and human resources. So, because again, you want to be effective, efficient, make sure that we're doing things with best practices, and things change in the industry. And if we don't change, then we become stale and we're not delivering services as best as we can. And that's very important in an environment where our, financial ability and our revenues have not been supporting us to the best ability. And so you have to squeeze those efficiencies out. So a lot of other things, homeless issues, major issue. And this council deserves a lot of credit for making a lot of inroads. Housing issues in community development, when that module comes up, you will hear about the regional housing need allocation and a lot of other housing issues that are going on. This state has a housing shortage. We have a homeless problem. And how do we address that? And then finally, FMC is the Fullerton Municipal Code. There are code sections that are over 100 years old. There's code sections that are over 50 years old. So you have to go back through that and look at them. And in fact, the code section for disaster emergency services is very old, over 4 decades. And just in looking at it, because I've been invoking some sections, it needs to be updated. So, but otherwise in 2020, so entering 2020, we had these ideas. We wanted to make this the year that people looked back in Fullerton and said that was the year that a lot of positive change, positive growth, and a renewed ability for Fullerton to be the best city occurred. And then along comes the coronavirus and COVID-19 and the pandemic stay-at-home order, closures of businesses, severe fiscal constraint because businesses were closed, and that's how we get most of our revenue. But in talking to our executive team and talking to our employees, everybody wants 2020 to still be that year. So we're still moving forward. We want to bring successes, and we will. One of the most important is we're going to be bringing a revenue option to City Council. We're looking at the first meeting in July, which I believe is July 7th, to potentially look at a sales tax on the ballot. And that's a very important thing because when you look at how cities are financed, we have very minimal revenues based on how we've developed as a city. And it's not anything that goes back 5 years or 10 years. These are decisions that really over the last 50 years have minimized our ability to be fiscally able to do what is the service expectation. And that includes, so I use comparisons with Orange at time and talk about the population and the size. Orange, so we generate about 20, let's say 22 million in sales tax a year. Orange generates about $43 million in sales tax a year. When you look at our land use percentages for what's available for commercial, so how big is our commercial zones and all that stuff, which is where you have the retail producing, the sales tax producing areas, they have about 2% more percentage. So we're in the 4s, they're in the 6s. Well, over 1 year, that difference isn't a lot, but over 40 years, that compounds to a huge difference in your revenue base. And then we also really don't have those commercial corridors that they have. And not that we want that, because going back in time, you looked at Fullerton was supported by the aerospace industry, the Hughes area, which is now Amridge Heights. So the city council and the planning commissions created housing to support the industry that we had. We don't have that. And after Prop 13, funding came primarily to cities from sales tax revenue. And that's what we are lacking at this time. So the COVID-19 pandemic, as I talked about, and as we talked about at the last session, hopefully that was informative. It's really, how to survive this long-term state of emergency. I described earlier that I was part of the governor's office during the Northridge earthquake, and actually was up in Hollywood at the time. That was an amazing time to be, part of the action, part of the air, part of the initial destruction. And this is completely and utterly different. So it's 2020 is going to be a very fascinating year. But again, it's our goal to make sure that we still get everything done that we want to do, and we're still going to do it. So one of the last bits I want to talk about before I have to take a drink is transparency. I really believe that transparency in government is critical. When I was going through the process to be the city manager here, the website was horrible. It still kind of is. There's a little bit more information, but I just was not finding the information that I believe should have been on the website and available about the city. So we are actually going to be updating our website, and we've slowly been putting more information onto it, digitizing a lot of files and getting that on. But it's really that organization that a newer website will help us do. So, but a lot of it is, making sure that people, the residents, have access to our budget and financial statements, that they understand, how public employees are getting paid. My contract is on the website. My benefits are on there for the chief and all the executive team. It's all on there. Making sure that we have a robust archive file, and that's within the city clerk's office. It's great and kind of fun to go back and look at what the council had passed or what some ordinances were from the 30s and 40s. It's a fabulous, kind of a fun, dorky thing to do. And then there's other things. We have to make sure that under various state laws, Senate Bill 7272, there's other information about vendors and products, enterprise systems, about our computer systems, the municipal code, statements on fair political practices that I'm sure the city clerk will talk a little bit more about. And then let's see. Oh yeah, the SB 978 law enforcement. So a lot of records, especially nowadays, um, people are asking us about policies related to police tactics and how we go about. In SB 978, if you go to the Fullerton police site, there's a tab and it has all those policies related to different things that would be of interest to people. So and then there's the SB 1421 site also, and that's on the disciplinary records of former officers. And I'm proud to say that in Fullerton, we have the most robust reporting on that. It was fought heavily by a lot of other cities and agencies, but we embraced it because we believed in it. And as you heard the mayor at the last meeting talk about a lot of the changes that we've done in our police department, that the police department itself has done, and really the newness of them. Over 60% or over 75 officers are new to the department in the last 9, 10 years, really 9 years. And so we're very young, but it is a great department and a different department. And together we have embraced a lot of these things. So transparency in government is critical. Going to that and finalizing, just if there's ever any questions, there's an email that my assistant gets first, but it's the city manager at cityoffullerton.com. Any questions, any concerns, anything like that, please send an email. Stop by City Hall once we're fully open again to the public, and we look forward to getting that. But I appreciate the time and going to turn it over to Anissa to take you to the next section of this on communication.
Hello, can everyone hear me okay? Excellent. Okay, thank you for that introduction, Ken. I am Anissa. I'm the communications coordinator here for the city of Fullerton. So I'm just going to dive right into it. I'm sure many of you are wondering how you can connect with us as an organization. There's a multitude of ways of doing that, and that has actually significantly changed since COVID-19. Pre-COVID-19, our communication efforts were a mix of virtual as well as in person. So a lot of times we would push out information via events, flyers over at City Hall, out in, again, community engagement events, wherever we could get a body to talk to you all. But with everything that happened with COVID-19, we had to reassess how we communicate with you all. And we're posting a lot more now on social media. We're utilizing a lot of these virtual tools that we either just haven't been using to the full capacity or didn't know that they existed. I just want to talk to you a little bit about where you can go and find information and how you can go about getting information that you care about and want to know about. The first and foremost is our website, cityoffullerton.com. As Ken mentioned, it's a work in progress, but there is a lot of really important information out there. And my one tip that I always give to everyone who calls into City Hall asking about where they can find a particular item, the best way to find something that you're looking for is to use the search function on our website. So that's my tip to you. Instead of clicking around trying to find a bunch of different links, just search for the item that you're looking for, and you'll find a lot of information on the topic that you want. The next best way, if you're old school, is just to call us. We're here. We're available. A lot of times we don't know what's going on in the city unless you call and you tell us. So if there is something that is of a concern to you that you want to let us know about, you can definitely pick up the phone and give us a call. I've put up some numbers here that I think are of importance. The 714-738-6300 number is the directory to City Hall. That is where you can kind of be aligned to different departments. But if you want to talk to someone in person, we have two numbers, the two ending in 6310 and 6311. Those are the city manager office line and city council line. Staff is available here to assist you with any questions or concerns you may have. So on the topic of going more virtual, we have a lot of social media accounts. We have an Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Nextdoor account, and recently we've just kind of brought back to life our YouTube channel. So this session, for example, will be put back onto the YouTube channel for everyone to watch later, however many times you want, anytime you want, 24/7. We also have an email notification system. If you didn't know, you can get city updates on your email just by visiting cityofFullerton.com/subscribe. We have new letters pertaining to COVID-19. That's updated now every 2 weeks. We have a library newsletter, newsletters concerning parks and recreation, and a new newsletter for the Fullerton business community where we've been sending out updates regarding reopening plans, strategies, and just a lot of info on that, on loans and resources that are available to you. If I could also make a recommendation, if you want to know what's happening on a weekly basis, on all departments, on all categories, what the city council is up to as well, I highly recommend subscribing to the city manager weekly message. There you get a breakdown of every department, what's going on, as well as what's going to be on the agenda coming up. So again, cityofullerton.com/subscribe. Another thing that a lot of people, I think, forget that is available to them is our cable channel. We have a public access channel called Fullerton TV, so FTV3. You can watch us anytime, AT&T Uverse Channel 99 or Spectrum Channel 3. This, for example, presentation is being broadcast live on your television screen. If you don't have cable, you can use an internet connection and view the live stream at cityofFullerton.com/FTV3. So today I kind of want to talk to you a little bit about social media, mainly because after the COVID-19, well, now that we are in the COVID-19 pandemic, we have been much more diligent about tracking our social media. In fact, about a week after the stay-at-home orders came into place, we started to really check our metrics on how we're communicating virtually with you all, the community. So I have a little bit of information here on our following. I want to state it's worth noting that a large majority of our followers on our main three platforms, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, 60% are Fullerton residents. So everything that we're posting, 60% of the time is going to hit a Fullerton resident. Approximately 25% of our followers are from neighboring cities, who also, would like to stay up to date with what's going on here. 65% of our followers are female, 35% are male. And on social media, of course, they're a younger generation. 53% are between the ages of 25 and 44. 24% are between the ages of 45 and 60. And then a small percentage, 4%, are older than 65 years old. So as you can see here, these show the number of followers that we obtained in the past 2 months since the stay-at-home orders. So Facebook, we currently have 11,000 fans. It's actually closing in on 12,000. Twitter is at 8,600 followers, closing in on 9,000. And then on Instagram, which has been the highest growing, I guess, fan base, follower base over in the past couple of weeks, is closing in on 5,000 followers at 4,600. In those span of 2 months with COVID-19, we have been posting a lot more than what we usually have been. So we have over 303 posts, information on everything from the latest governor update to where you could find a resource. So that's an average of 4 or 5 times a day. So if you're looking for information from us, I definitely recommend following one of our accounts. So one thing I also want to talk to you about is engagement. Engagement is really important when you're talking about the content that you're sharing. It tells you about if someone is actively clicking on a link and taking in the content that you post. So I just want to talk about that a little bit very quickly. On Facebook, over the past 2 months, we've had 23,951 engagements. Facebook is by far our most, I would say, active virtual online community. People who follow our page consistently read our content and are actively liking, sharing, and commenting on it. Twitter doesn't get as many engagements as, for example, Facebook. However, I think it's important to note that it does have a high impression rate. So impressions are how many times something comes up on someone's device. So if you're scrolling, you may not actively engage with the content that we post, but it did show up. And so over the past 2 months, there was 97,000 impressions on all the content that we posted. So I know, and the lesson that I've learned is that if we want to get a message out there, you've got to tweet it. And then lastly, Instagram is kind of their middle road. We had 5,000 engagements over the past 2 months. So in total, we've got reactions, comments, shares, replies, retweets, and likes. For the past 2 months, we've had over 55,000 engagements. And this is a significant increase prior to COVID-19. In fact, over a 242% increase over the past 2 months. So I also thought it'd be fun to share what our best posts have been over the past couple of months. I think it speaks a lot to how we are as a community and what it is that we care about. So on Instagram, our most liked and most engaged with post was a posting of of the fountain being lit up blue in support of frontline workers. So I think that speaks that the community is wanting to see something good and that we're all in this together, and it was a moment of solidarity. On Facebook, our most comments and highest reach of people was a post on our total reconstruction and rehabilitation project along Brea Boulevard and Baston Cherry Road. We all know that our roads could be in better shape. So I think this just speaks to the fact that people were excited and also curious to know what other projects we have on the line for road repair. And there was a lot of positive and engaging feedback on that post. And then on Twitter, one of the most retweets and likes was our posting of the County of Orange's announcement that they strongly recommended workers at essential businesses to wear face coverings. So again, that was a post in the height of the stay-at-home orders, the height of this pandemic. And it was a very important piece of information that I think just kind of caught wind, and people were sharing that left and right. Okay, so what's new and what's going to be going on in the future with our communication efforts? One thing that we've learned in the past couple of months is that live streaming is a way to engage with the community to provide lengthy and detailed information in a highly accessible manner. So programs such as this, our Citizens Academy, you may have noticed we're also doing the mayor's town hall. Live stream has been a way where we've seen comments and been able to engage with you all in a much more efficient way. And we learn more and more about what your interests, thoughts, and going-ons with the city of Fullerton are every time we do something on live stream. We're also looking to kind of revamp our FTV3 channel. We're looking to bring on a Roku and Apple TV app. So if you have those devices, you can click on to our 24/7 broadcasting, and you can select the programming that you want to see at any time and it be accessible to you. So instead of having to go onto YouTube or Facebook, if you have a Roku or Fire Stick device, something like that, you'll be able to see our programming pretty soon. And then another lesson learned was that short videos, kind of informational PSAs, things like that, we would like to do more of those. We see that the engagement and the reach is much higher when we put some sort of moving graphic or video out there for you all to see. So expect to see more from us on our Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter pages for things like that. And then if you ever have any questions for me on how we can reach out to you better, or just anything that's going on in the community, you're free to email me or reach out to me. My information is here. But with that, I'm going to kick it off to Lucinda in the city clerk's office.
Thank you, Anissa. It's actually Lucinda sitting in the city manager's office at the moment because you don't want to hear all the background noise from my computer. It's logged in the council chambers, so thank you. You can go to the next slide, please. And several years back, the State City Clerks Association developed an elevator speech for clerks to explain just what the heck a city clerk does. But for those of you who've been in Fullerton City Hall, you know that our building is only 3 stories tall, so our elevator rides are really quick. So next slide, please. With the quick version of this, if you're in the City Hall elevator, is that the city clerk is like the Secretary of State at the municipal level. This is the state of California kind of Secretary of State, not the federal level kind of negotiating the release of foreign held hostages kind of Secretary of State. And the city clerk oversees elections, records, and legislative support. If that elevator ride happens to only be 1 floor, I just use the quick 1 word that best describes the mission of the city clerk's office, which is transparency. And next slide, please. California government code requires the governance of general law cities is done by a minimum of 5 entities, and that includes the city council, the city clerk, the city treasurer, police chief, and the fire chief. Various federal, state, and local statutes dictate the responsibilities of the city clerk's office, and some of the most common ones are listed on this slide, and some that you may have heard of before, like the Brown Act and the Public Records Act. And we'll get to the next slide, please. The way a city clerk is appointed and where the city clerk's office resides in an organization can vary city by city. In Fullerton, my official title is the city clerk / city clerk or clerk services manager. I'm appointed to the city clerk part of the job by city council, and I'm hired as the clerk services manager by the city manager. In reality, I report to the city manager in the city manager's office. This hybrid process was a carryover from the transition when, as Ken mentioned, we used to have an elected city clerk and then transitioned to a appointed city clerk here in Fullerton. As you can see on the chart, the city clerk's office is a division of the city manager's office, and I report to the city manager's office for the most part every day. And I have a full-time assistant city clerk and a part-time deputy city clerk that report to me. And the next slide. Those of you with an eye for detail may have noticed that I have MMC after my name on my opening slide. MMC stands for Master Municipal Clerk. It's the highest professional designation granted by the International Institute of Municipal Clerks, which is our credentialing organization. It's sort of the black belt level achievement in the clerk's world and requires a demonstrated mastery of educational and professional requirements in the city clerk position. CMC stands for Certified Municipal Clerk, which is like the brown belt level of certification on the path to earning a MMC. And a certified municipal clerk must demonstrate the skills and knowledge necessary to perform the technical duties of the city clerk's profession. And our deputy city clerk just recently earned her CMC profession certification, and she'll be working her way up to MMC very soon. And the next slide, please. As I mentioned, the city clerk duties generally fall into 3 categories, and one of those is elections. The city clerk by statute is the city's elections official. In some organizations, the city clerk runs a standalone election, which includes everything from setting up the nominations to running the polling places to hiring poll workers and tabulating the votes on election day. In Orange County, in Fullerton, like all cities in Orange County, we consolidate our elections with the Orange County Registrar of Voters, which means that the city clerk in all the cities process the candidates during the filing period for nominations for the upcoming election. We process ballot measures and any petitions for recalls, referendums, or initiatives. And the county takes care of the actual voting part of the election, printing the ballots, getting the voter information guide out, setting up the polling sites, and tabulating the results. City Council files campaign finance, or sorry, the City Council candidates will file campaign finance reports with the city clerk. Other kinds of offices at the state or county level will file with the state or the county. There are 2 elections questions that my office receives pretty frequently. They want to know if council members have term limits, and the answer is yes. They have 3 4-year terms, and then they have to take an election cycle off. And the other question we often get asked is, do we have campaign contribution limits? And at the moment, we have none, but the state law is going to set a default limit starting next year unless City Council takes action to go to another limit. In the March primary, Orange County transitioned to a vote center elections model, which allows voters to have more choice in how they vote. This meant that instead of roughly 1,000 polling places open on just election day, the county sent vote by mail ballots to all Orange County voters, opened 188 vote centers, and they were open for at least 4 days before the election, and some of those were open for 11, and opened ballot drop boxes placed throughout the county for up to 30 days before election day. You've probably heard in the news about all this by mail ballot voting that they're thinking about doing nationwide, and in light of COVID-19, we in Orange County are already doing that sort of process here, as well as many other counties in California, and some states like Colorado have been at all mail ballot voting for several years. So for many places, it won't be such a dramatic issue as it will be for other parts of the country. And if we can flip to the next slide, I'll talk about districts and redistricting. Some of you may be familiar with this map already. This is the city's district map. In 2016, voters passed an ordinance to move from at-large city council elections to electing council members by district. The November 2018 election was the first phase of our transition to district elections. Voters in District 3 and 5 elected their city council representatives, which are Councilmember Silva and Zara, respectively, while the other 3 council seats with 2 years remaining on those at-large terms continue to seat the at-large council members. This November, Districts 1, 2, and 4 will get to elect their district representatives, and by December of this year, we'll have fully transitioned to district representatives on the city council. Now, as you know, 2020 is also a census year, and that means after all the numbers are tallied, we are required to look at our districts and see if they meet all the legal requirements, such as an even distribution of population throughout the districts, and in comparison to the new census data. So depending on the census results, we could have a redistricting on the horizon in 2020, so stay tuned for that. And next slide, please. While most people think of November as, or maybe October as the start of the election season, in the city clerk world, the election season started about 2 weeks ago. The nomination period to run for city council begins, here's a technical term, 113 days before the election, which usually works out to about the second week of July and runs through early August. The nomination process involves a meeting with the city clerk to pull the paperwork, a completion of all that paperwork by the potential candidate, including collecting at least 20 signatures of voters to get nominated for the ballot, and another meeting with the city clerk to come back in and file all that paperwork. This year, with COVID and with some flexibility by governor executive orders, we can do a lot of that process that we had to do in person. We can now do via WebEx or by exchanging electronic documents. So we are scrambling to get those orders in place and be ready for the filing period, which starts in about a month. Information on the filing period, we'll have that on the website soon, cityofFullerton.com, and look for the city clerks section. We'll have information there also on the nominations process and who's pulled papers and who's qualified for the ballot, information for people who need to contact candidates, the candidate statement if they submit one, and a lot more on the website once the filing period gets going. We also get a lot of inquiries this time of year about campaign sign regulations as they start to pop up around town. The city's regulations allow campaign signs on private property only, and there's no start or end date for posting or removing campaign signs as long as they are on private property. If you happen to see any signs that are not on private property, we'll have some contact information on the website to let the city know that there are signs that are not properly placed. And next slide, please. Another big chunk of what the city clerk has to do is records management. The California Public Records Act provides rules for how the city manages its public records. Destruction of public records can occur only when the record has passed its retention period and with the authorization of the city attorney, the department head, and the city clerk. City Council has adopted a records retention schedule, which lists the various retention periods for city documents, and no document can be destroyed before that retention is expired. The city clerk's office and other departments have placed many records online in our document archive, which Ken also mentioned earlier. That's also on our website. So the public can access those documents at any time without submitting any kind of request. We are continually adding more and more content to that archive. But as you can imagine, we have a lot of documents in the city. So if there's a record that is not available in our archive that you'd like to make a request for, you can submit a public records request to the city clerk's office. And yes, we have a form for that. It's on our website. You can just fill it out and it goes right into the city clerk's office email and we'll get you processed. And by law, we have to get a response back to you within 10 calendar days. Next slide, please. The third bucket of work that the city clerk's office does is the legislative category, which is a fancy name for everything else the city clerk's office does that doesn't fall into the elections or the records management bucket. So here's the list of items. The list of items here you can see is very, very long. I won't go over every item on the list this evening, but from the public perspective, probably the most visible activity that you would see us doing are getting the city council agenda packets together and running the city council meetings. City clerk's office is constantly in a cycle of either preparing an agenda packet or preparing for a city council meeting, unless it's one of those lucky 5 Tuesday months, which June is. So we'll have one week in here where maybe we'll get a little bit of a breather. The agendas for the city council and all of our standing committees are posted on our city's website. There's actually a button right on the homepage to get you there. We stream the video of city council meetings over a cable channel, as mentioned, over our web TV channel on our website and on the agenda posting page. And we do the streaming also for Planning Commission. And on the next slide, I'll talk to you about boards, commissions, and committees. The city has 8 standing committees, each of which have regular meeting dates, and info on all of these committees, including the membership, the meeting schedules, contact info, more descriptions about the responsibilities of each of these groups is available on our website. And all 8 of those are listed here. And on the next slide, as I mentioned earlier, these are the previous slide were standing committees. That is a legislative body formed by city council action that has a regular meeting schedule. Those bodies must follow the regulations that are outlined in the Brown Act. Now, the city also has many ad hoc committees. Those are formed for a specific task and defined end date for the committee, either by a date or an ending task, and then the committee dissolves. And the Brown Act regulations do not apply to ad hoc committees, but the city generally follows Brown Act guidelines when we have ad hoc committees just as a best practice. Now, the MADI Act is a California law that governs the committee member appointments and the required noticing for expired terms or when we have a midterm vacancy. Most committee member terms end at the same time that the term of their appointing council member ends, but there, of course, in government, there's always an exception. All those term dates are listed on our website. And if you're interested in applying for any of our committees, the committee application is on the website. You can apply for a committee at any time, even if we don't have an active recruitment. We'll keep those applications on file for 1 year, and if a vacancy occurs either midterm or when a term is about to expire, if it's within the 1 year retention of that application, we'll get in touch with you and let you know that there's a vacancy and ask you if you're interested. And that's a very, very quick overview of what we do in the city clerk's office. If you need more information, this is where you can contact me. I'd love to get lost in the weeds and nerdy about some of the minute details of what we do over there. So please feel free to contact me at any time. We'll turn it over to, I believe Tony is next.
Thank you, Lucinda. It's always interesting to hear about what the city clerk does, and you have such a passion for it. We really appreciate you giving this presentation. I'm the deputy city manager. I've only been in the city of Fullerton for about 7 months, and I think it's a wonderful organization. I previously have about almost 20 years of experience working in local government. Like our city manager and our administrative analyst, I also have a master's in public administration, and I also have a master's of science degree in sustainability. So I'm going to talk about a few things, and then we'll get to your questions. If you can move the slide, Anissa. So we all probably remember this Schoolhouse Rock video about how a bill becomes a law. Well, here at the city of Fullerton and in most local municipalities, we really watch the legislative process because oftentimes a bill can have a positive or a negative impact and so on our organization. And so it's really important for us to really participate in the legislative process. What this means is that we, with the assistance in the case of the city of Fullerton, who have a state and federal advocacy firm that assists us, we advocate for or against bills or pieces of legislation or rules or regulations that could have a negative impact or harm the way we do things. So advocacy is an important part of shaping public policy, and our city council has been active in supporting or opposing legislation that comes before the state legislature or federal government. Next slide. So in 2019, the City Council adopted something called a legislative platform. And this is a guiding document that confirms the City Council's position on current issues with the potential to directly or indirectly impact the city, thereby establishing guidelines on how to pursue pending legislation through monitoring and communications activities. A lot of what I do is work with our advocacy firm to understand what bills are coming through the state legislature and that are coming through Congress so that we know what to expect and we can put together an appropriate response. And working with our lobbyists, our council members who sit on our legislative subcommittee. Next slide. The legislative platform has 3 guiding principles, and the first one is to preserve local control. This is probably the most important. We've seen over the years Sacramento take away a lot of control over local decisions, and so our city council really believes in preserving this. This is really to preserve and protect the city's powers, duties, and prerogatives to enact local legislation and policy direction concerning local affairs and opposing legislation that preempts local authority. Oftentimes we see the state making decisions about housing or environmental laws, things of that nature, and the city wants to always be able to have local control and make our own decisions. So this is why we have preserved local control as one of our legislative platform principles. The second one is promoting fiscal sustainability. You heard our city manager talk about ensuring that taxpayer dollars are well spent and our conservative philosophy here. And this is no different in our legislative platform. We support measures that promote fiscal sustainability, predictability, financial independence, and preserve the city's revenue base and maximum local control over local government budgeting. We often, the legislative platform opposes measures that shift local funds to the county, state, or federal governments and or make cities more dependent on the county, state, or federal governments for financial stability, such as unfunded mandates or mandated costs with no guarantee of local reimbursement. And lastly, our legislative platform supports funding opportunities. And these are opportunities that allow the city to compete for its fair share of regional, state, and federal funding. This could be through grants. This could be talking about the money that the state received for the COVID response. So we want to ensure that the city of Fullerton receives our fair share. So we support funding for programs including but not limited to economic development, such as infrastructure investment in housing, transportation projects, including road resurfacing, bicycle and pedestrian safety, multimodal transportation, and transit-oriented development. So those are just some things. So our legislative platform then goes into a number of areas of policy statements, and this allows us to submit letters of opposition or support as long as they align with what is in the legislative platform. And these are varied. There's so many bills that are introduced in the last legislative session. There was almost 2,700 bills introduced into the legislature. And this year we have seen nearly that much, but they've all been, the legislature has been singularly focused on the COVID response. So a lot of bills that have been introduced have either turned into 2-year bills or have just sort of died or gone away. So as you can see, we cover our interests are every aspect of the city. Is almost every department is covered here to make sure that those 3 guiding principles of our legislative platform, that we are able to advocate for bills that are important to the city. Next slide. So actually, can you back up one slide? I want to mention one thing. Another thing that we do is we work closely with our state legislators. And so just this past session, pre-COVID, we worked with Assembly Member Sharon Quirk Silva to introduce some special bills that would benefit the city. One was Assembly Bill 2738, which was transportation funding apportionment to counties. We want to ensure that the city is able to receive its fair share of transportation dollars to pave our roads. Unfortunately, this bill, because of COVID, has sort of died, and we hope to reintroduce it in the next legislative session. The next one was a Senate bill that was introduced by Senator Ling Chang, and this was SB 1289, and it had to do with CEQA exemption, or the California Environmental Quality Act. And when you hear from the Department of our Community and Economic Development Department, they'll talk a lot about CEQA and its impact on our projects. So these are things that we also do. We work closely with our legislators to craft bills that can benefit the city. Next slide. And lastly, the city manager's office is unique in that we get to work on things that support every single department. And a lot of what I do and what I've done for many years is support departments with their priorities and projects. So in local government, we exist to implement the policies set forth by City Council. And oftentimes these are broad policies that cover many different departments. And so we're lucky in the city manager's office that we get to work on a lot of exciting projects that cross all departments. In my nearly 20 years of experience, I've been able to work on something in every department, from the fire department to IT. The exciting thing about the city manager's department is that no day is the same. So some things that I get to work on here are organizational reviews. We're always looking for ways to streamline our operations and to make things more efficient. So we look at departments and see how we can implement best practices so that we are serving the community the most efficient and best way that we can. Here in Fullerton, we have implemented some professional development and organizational development programs within our organization, with the understanding that, there's something known as the silver tsunami that's coming. It's a number of people who are ready to retire. So we want to make sure that we have a bench of smart, qualified, excited people to continue to carry on the work here in Fullerton. So we really strive to develop our employees. We get to work on telecommunications. Some of you might be familiar with the Sci-Fi project. That's a citywide fiber network that's being installed right now. City Council approved it in 2014, and they have been slowly making their way through the city. There are some zones that are ready to turn on so that you have the ability to select, if you choose, high-speed internet service. We work on a number of sustainability initiatives in this office. We are part of the Orange County Recycling Market Development Zone, which is an incentive program for manufacturers that use recycled content in their manufacturing process, and that includes the city of Huntington Beach, the city of Garden Grove, Orange, Stanton, Santa Ana, the County of Orange, and the city of Lake Forest. So these cities comprise the Orange County Recycling Market Development Zone, and we administer it here in the city of Fullerton. We're also looking to launch a sustainable business certification program, and this will be to assist businesses with reducing their operational costs. So these are all just exciting things that we get to work on in the city manager's office. We serve as a liaison to other departments and help them with achieving their policy goals and strategic objectives. Next slide. And with that, I will close out our session and I will call for questions. I do see one question coming in, and this is for our city manager, Ken Domer. And this is from Rosalie Beard. And she asked, do you anticipate a continued reduction of services into 2021 and beyond?
Thanks for the question. So our budget for 2021 is difficult, and we are going to see reduced levels of services. I believe at the council meeting, one of the descriptions I used was just even in our landscaping about, going from a service level of A, which may be, a daily or every other day, to a level of B or C, which is maybe now once a week or every other week on mowing. And so, yes, I do at this point. And mostly if we do not get any type of backfill for the revenue that we have had to pull out of our contingency fund for the reduced revenues from the pandemic, we are using about 3 million this year, depending on how many reductions we can get going into this next year, working with our labor units and other issues. We're asking all of our contractors and consultants for at least a 5% cut. We may have to pull more money out of our reserve. And unfortunately, as we've seen, those reserves are minimal and need to be a little bit higher. So I do foresee some additional service reductions, but of course, our main goal is to minimize those. And a lot of it is, our employees don't want to see the service reductions, but it may be necessary without any other type of revenue coming into the city. So.
Thank you. And Anissa, I'll turn it over to you to respond to questions on Facebook Live.
Yeah, so I actually might direct this one over to Ken. Someone on Facebook Live is asking what portion of the city's budget is attributed to the police department?
We have that somewhere. It is, so the general fund budget is, and you have to look at the general fund versus like the total fund, as I talked about, which is 240, which is capital improvement projects, the water, sewer, and all that stuff. But of the general fund, it is about, I'm going to say 40%. Altogether, police and fire are about 70%. Actually, a little bit less than that, but I'm going to say 40%. I can check those figures real quick based on our most recent budget. But the budget of the police department is about $45 million at this point. So.
Okay, so we also have a question about the potholes in our city. So before I kind of kick it off back to you, Ken, about kind of the the state of and the condition of our roads, I do want to make a plug-in that if you see a pothole, a crack in your we have something called the My Fullerton app. It's an app that you can download on your smartphone. Take a picture. It takes the GPS location of where you're at or where the pothole or the crack may be, and it reports it directly to the maintenance division. You can also report a bunch of different things like graffiti and I think even code enforcement complaints. But with that, Ken, if you have maybe something to say about the condition of our roads. Ken, you're on mute.
There you go. Thank you. They're in bad shape, and our goal is to improve them. Real quick on the last one, from the slides on Tuesday's meeting, 47% of the general fund budget is for the police department. An additional 23% is for the fire department. So that 70% figure is right there. And the total general fund expenditures are about $106 million. So going to the conditions of the road, on the, I think it's the next meeting on June 16th, we will have the pavement management program brought back to the council. Generally, that is every 2 years, we have to look at the conditions of our streets, and the arterials, which are, the main streets, not your residential streets, are reviewed every 2 years to look at their pavement condition index. And so the pavement management program is basically a compilation of all those conditions, and that's how we determine what streets to do next. The street conditions did not happen overnight. This is from truly decades of not putting more money into the roads than we should have. And looking back at the history of Fullerton, we just had the Infrastructure and Natural Resources Advisory Committee do an infrastructure review. And their precursor, the Investment Advisory Committee, in years before, even going back into the early 80s, always looked at the condition of our infrastructure. And their conclusion was always the same. We're not putting enough money into our infrastructure, our roads and streets, but it's because we don't have enough revenue to support the services that we're providing. So these are all decisions that if you need to put, say, 7 million into your streets in a given year, and you only put 6 or 5 over 10 years, that's 10 million. It's 10 to 20 million dollars less of input or so that you needed to do. So that's how we got to a point over 30 or 40 years where we do have the worst roads in all of Orange County. And so our goal and the city council goal has been to put money into it. We did sell some properties and that money was invested. That's what has benefited the Brea Boulevard project and the Euclid project. But the reality is when you're only putting about $5 to $6 million a year into our roads, we're not going to get to where we need. So we need that additional revenue source for that. In the next meeting, maybe the meeting after that, I'm going to be bringing a proposal for a infrastructure fund to the council, which would be a way that we could take more money and put it into an infrastructure fund. But again, it requires more revenue to go into it for it to be impactful.
Okay, and then I actually have a question here from WebEx from Gretchen Cox. Our water rates went up this year. Is that money is still locked in for water infrastructure repair and replacement, right?
Correct.
And
Yeah,
then,
so water fund money is going to only be used for water improvements and the water connections. So.
Okay, and then I have another question here from Facebook Live. Is there ever going to be a budget to allow hygiene stations and toilet stations for our general public and the homeless?
There is no dedicated budget for that right now. As you know, with this current budget that we just passed, we were cutting things left and right. So the biggest issue on that really was the state, to replace affordable housing, created Senate Bill 2 funds. We still have not received those Senate Bill 2 funds. It's going to be about $800,000 a year, but all of that funding source is actually going into our participation in the North Orange County Service Planning Area, the 2 new homeless shelters that are being built in Placentia, now open, and Buena Park, which should be open at the end of this month. So we do not have a dedicated funding source. We do not have additional revenue to provide those services.
Sorry about that. I do have another question here from Arnell Dino. My apologies if I got that name wrong. Due to the current situation, has the city considered bringing back the idea of a citizens police oversight commission?
Has not been brought back to the council for any discussion. The city council technically is that oversight. They oversee all departments. We do have a third-party review. Some folks who have been around for a long time, because we brought it in, or the city brought it in after the Kelly Thomas issue, is Michael Giannacco. It's the Office of Independent Review. We are under contract with his group, OIR, and what they do for us is they review all uses of force and all discipline cases, and then other things as needed as we go forward. So If there's a use of force, if there's a discipline case that meets the threshold, once it is wrapped up, and sometimes even during it, they are reviewing that for us and then providing us recommendations. But ultimately, it's the city council that is the police oversight, and that's common in many cities. You do have, like in the city of LA, you have a separate appointed, but at that point, they're able to appoint folks who have, and the city can give them the ability to be a little bit more understanding of the issues surrounding it. But in the size of our city, it's not very common at all.
Okay, and I think we've got one more question. This is from Joy. With the current COVID-19 pandemic, knowing many organizations are starting to change their strategic framework that will impact the next few years, what do you see as a primary focus point that will change for the city in the long-term future? For example, will it be technology, infrastructure, or quality of services?
Well, our goal is always to offer high quality services. I really see it as technology. With the planning, building, community and economic development department with planning and building issues, we really focused on online submittals of plans and doing electronic plan checks. We, about 2 years ago, started the process to swap out our old permit check software and permit software. There are additional modules that we can buy that actually extend the ability for electronic access for people. Is that if you have a building remodel, you could work with somebody, they could submit everything online. And as our community and economic development director will tell you during his session, sometimes the best trip to City Hall is the one you don't have to take at all. And that's what we're looking to do. So really, it's that technology and the process going forward. When this crisis hit, we were scrambling for the cameras and everything to do remote. So we will be increasing our emphasis and use of technology going forward.
Okay, with that, I don't have any questions on my
I
end.
see one other, Anissa, there's another question I see from, well, it's Mr. Domer, why is the police chief hiring process different? Do other cities and OC follow the same process? Thank you. Yes and no. Here in the city, the police chief used to be appointed by the city manager. And it was the Kelly Thomas incident that changed it to the point where the city council now is the hiring authority, though the city manager retains the ability for discipline, performance management, and ultimately termination if that's an issue. That's the same way in Huntington Beach. In other cities, it is left to the city manager, but it's really a mix and match. And I don't think there's any reason why. A lot of times the city councils, just because of the profile of the position, want the chief to be appointed by them. And sometimes, a lot of times they do go through a community process. They also do that. The city council directly appoints a city attorney if that is a position that they have. So that's not a city manager responsibility because it answers directly to the city council. So it just depends. We're about the normal at this point.
Okay, I'm seeing no other questions on my end. Ken, if there are no questions on yours.
Well, let me see. I'm going to put on the reading glasses because it's there's a couple more on the chat function.
I was able to see some of those on the chat function, but I think maybe some participants may have private questions.
Okay, yeah. So do we answer, how many other cities does our city council serve in? So a city council member can only be in the city that they reside in. So if you work in a different place, you can't be on that city council. So it's you can only hold one elected office, and actually you can't in some places be on, say, the school board and the city council. That would be a conflict in those interests. So okay. And let's see. The overall IT strategy, Anissa, did we answer that one? I don't think we did. So on the information technology, we are kind of in a transition right now with our IT department. We had some issues which really, once we kind of pulled back the layers of the onion, revealed that our IT infrastructure was in horrible condition. And so we've been in the process. We're working with a outside consultant. They've been working with us now for about 6 months or more, doing a great job. We're completely rebuilding our IT infrastructure from the ground floor. So where we may have had, 120 something servers, probably only needed about 60 of them. We are now going virtual with our server capacity and updating all of we actually still have computers that we've had to extend the service warranty by paying Microsoft because we didn't have the extended service pack, and a lot of other issues. So yeah, we do not have a chief information officer at this time, but we are transitioning. I am reviewing the classifications of a director of IT so that we can bring somebody back in and be professional in that regard. And that's going to be helpful. So,
Ken, if I may, I see another question here. It's from
yes.
Burnell. Have we seen an increase of business closures due to COVID-19?
So a couple things. One, we don't get notice of closures. We have our business registration where we know when somebody opens. We do know that a lot of businesses are still closed. For example, a tattoo parlor or nail salon, they have not yet been able to open based on the governor's releasing them to open in stage 3. I do expect that we will see closures, but we don't have direct records right now. Our mission is to help everybody get back and open. We'll be receiving some money from the state and from the County Board of Supervisors for business assistance grants, and we're looking forward to distributing those and getting them out as to many businesses as possible that need them. And so we want to make sure that we do what we can to keep those businesses open. So.
Okay, I'm not saying any more on my end.
So there's one last one from a Michael Kluwer. Thanks for the presentation. I know the budget has been approved. At this point, there are no plans to defund the Fullerton Police Department, are there? No, there are not. And that's, I think if I did miss a meeting, a question or anything like that, again, please send anything that you want to citymanager@cityoffullerton.com. But it is 7:00 now. We want to be respectful of your time. We do appreciate you guys logging in, listening, and we will see you next week. Anissa, what is the department next week?
It is the library.
All right. Well, Judy Booth will present you all about the library, and we are looking forward to being able to reopen it. It's still closed to the public, but if you have to return a book, you can. And we just want to make sure that we get that back open. So appreciate you guys' listening in and participation, and thank you very much.